Now that was smooth as silk, Johnny, and just, you have such a beautiful vibe, of speaking as a Californian, I can use that word. It has just the most wonderful feeling to it, and I can kind of tell that this is also, Muse Sounds with Muse score. But you seem to have gotten past a lot of the awkwardness. I mean, of course, there's still that big kind of huge clunky jump in, that just sudden break, like a clumsy tape edit, in different places, like when you get like a sudden forte or fortissimo. But in general, you seem to have gotten the best out of your sound set, whatever its limitations might be, and you have gotten just a wonderful pastoral kind of sound. Okay. Now, there are some things that you really do need to work on and take into consideration. But, the architecture is very strong. It's not like there's just constant errors and everything. It's more like with a lot of tweaking, you could possibly get this ready for a reading or even a performance. Okay? So let's talk about the first problem. There's some general problems. Okay, so maybe just addressing them up front helps to save a little time. One of the problems is you are using, like a lot of the times you are using the piano style slurring, right? I mean, what you are telling, you're literally telling your violinists here is that you want them to slur an entire 2 bars worth of material, right? And then, if you think about this, like you have 2 instances of slurring over repeated notes, right? Couldn't you maybe just start the slur on the second beat? So da ta, right, and same thing, da ta, right, and then da ta, rather than da. So there's almost no, the way that this is slurred like this is there's almost no articulation on the repeated note. It's sort of like semi-portato, right? So better to split that up. Try not to slur over repeated notes. It's kind of, in a transcription sense, it's a sort of a sign of carelessness, right? Now here, see, this is exactly right? Here you have repeated notes with the slur, and you have portato, marked, right? So in other words, a slur over tenuto marks, right? And then you've got that here. So if you understand that here, then you should understand that, like, if, this is just gooey as all hell, and it's better to start the slur on the second beat. And then, and then just there are some other places, like here, for instance. Really, you really want this all to be under one bow. It's sort of really shapeless, isn't it? And then, there are a couple of other weird things. And this so we don't have the downbeat. Ta. Wouldn't it be better to go up, down, up, down? Do you know what I'm saying? Or even down, up, down. I think you're treating the piano phrasing marks as if they were phrasing the breath and the bowing of the players, when that's just not, you are giving up control when you do that. A lot of times, like you may run into a like a session guy, or a session player for like a Hollywood orchestra, and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll just, don't worry about that, we'll just work out the bowing ourselves and just put a big slur over it if you want it all to be smooth. But that's giving up control, right? That's it's better for you to know how to work it out so you get the best effect yourself, okay? Then there are some other things I'll just address now before we get into it too much further, and then I don't have to later. And that has to do with dovetailing between parts, okay? Now sometimes your dovetailing ends on a 16th note, and that's great. But sometimes your dovetailing ends on an 8th note, and that's not good at all. Always end on the same time value that you are dovetailing over to, right? So if you want your cellos to just seamlessly switch over to violas and second violins, then just make it a 16th note, because otherwise this smears over into the next pitch, right? And you might think, oh, that doesn't really matter. It's just a momentary note. A lot of times people try to score or try to play exactly what you scored. Yeah, same thing here. Like, that these should all be 16th notes. And then there was the other question of, like, coming in on each other's toes. And let me see if I can find a good instance of that. See, these are things that I sort of noticed on my kind of last go. Why am I not seeing them? Right. Okay. Well, as I run across them, I'll talk about them. Okay. All right. So let's start at the beginning. So those are just like some things that I want you to think about, right? And then as I address them as we go along, you'll have a better grasp of that, right? Okay. So let's just go straight to the evaluation criteria. Does the intro set the mood effectively? Okay, and I mean, I feel that it does. Like, especially like you have a bit of reverb on this, and you're kind of trying to bring back that kind of sound of the concert chamber. Like a big kind of some if something were played in one of those big symphony halls, of the Romantic period, or some of which still exist, like Carnegie Hall, I would say, late Romantic. So yeah, so you will get that kind of a sound, that real live sound. Um, so so I would say this works for me. Just all strings, direct transcription. Okay, there's no need for this F to stop, right? It seems as if that's what's happening, but if you listen to what the pianist is doing, this is why I really, really wanted people to base a lot of what they were doing on what Spencer was doing or some other pianist. Spencer was leaving his thumb sitting on the F while he went ya da 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 with the top part of his hand, right? And his thumb was continuing to hold. Just because it's only an eighth value in the piano score doesn't mean that you should let go of it, right? So I would just make this a quarter note with a fermata over it, right? And there are ways of filling in this harmony even further, right? Just to so as not to lose the stronger texture. Like you could have done this. You could have gone unison, da dum, and then had the second violinist just hold on to the B. So da dum as the first violin went da da dum, and then you have a full you have that full triad. Excuse me, I meant to say G here, not F. Apologies. I was thinking of, I was, I was thinking in the key of F, as it was kind of, as it was transposed downwards for most of the entries, right? So I've just got my head stuck in that. So yeah, G is what I meant. Okay. So I mean, that all works for me. Now, let's continue on. Now, do you really want up, down, up, down? So do you notice how when you do this, you kind of go, it's like a sag. What if I went like this? Up, down, up, down. That way you get the push up. Da, and you get the break and the slur right here. And then you have even length bows, right? And then you can just keep going on with that pattern. Down, up, down, right? So you make the decision. Now here, with your oboes, you probably only need one single oboe. I think that's perfectly fine. With two oboes, you get kind of almost like a trumpet-like sound, and it has a certain intensity, and you have less expression from the oboist because they have to listen to each other, and they can't have the natural kind of vibrato that a single player would have, right? They have to really control it and just match each other, or else it'll sound very funky. Some people hate any kind of exposed melodic doubling, melodic unison of two double reeds, right? Like whether it's bassoon or oboe. And of course, I just really don't like. I don't like bassoon, tenor register, duet. So I think to get that really warm sound behind here, you're better off just with like one oboe, and of course you can slur all the way across with just with the winds. They can go on forever, right? Well, not forever, but oboe feels like it can. And then, like, I'm kind of thinking, do you really want the separate bows, fourth and bum 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 and with your bassoons? Or if you want this to be really smooth, da da da, would you maybe rather have ba da 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 da, down, up. See, so there's a lot more going on here than you may be thinking. So just really always think about like what is the right amount of bow? How can the player bow evenly back and forth across. It doesn't always have to be rigid or anything or mechanical, but just convenient is better, and making things smoother, right? So yeah, so like, is there a natural flow? I would say that there's a kind of a more chunky flow here. And I mean, I love the use of the horns here, and I love the fact that you used horns in D. There were a few entries that had horns in G above and horns in C below, and then that really limited what the C horns could do. Whereas the D horns, the D crook for a horn is practically a C basso crook in terms of its length, right? So it has a kind of a gutsier sound, and it's really great for some of these low notes. So that nothing lost. Yeah, so just there's still a bit more to work out here. Um, so yeah, so you know, natural transition to octaves, expanding without clogging up. I mean, yeah, sort of, right? So there's just a bit of work to do, but it doesn't mean that that you're on the wrong track. It's just some adjusting needs to happen here. All right, so now going on, do you contrast with the theme? Not really, because like you have like introductory theme, main theme, leggermente theme, wrap up. So everything, you're always using your first violins to state everything, right? So this is something to think about next time you do a transcription. Like maybe not always have the same instruments always introducing what the theme is, especially in music that's heavily thematic, this sort of common practice, late classical, early romantic kind of stuff that's really, a lot of it is based on the way that the themes are explored by the orchestra and how they relate to each other and how they return to the original key and everything else. Sometimes if you talk to a conductor, they may be focused more on the structure than they are on the orchestration, right? Because that is like their ability to understand the structure is really what helps the orchestra as much or even more than if they understand every single little nuance and tweak and everything else. So here, I think that you should not abandon the word leggermente, right? Because Beethoven is telling his pianist, "Hey, I want you to be agile. I want you to be nimble on your fingertips. I want you to practically dance through this part." Right? It's almost like he's going, "Ha ha ha." Don't have a care in the world as I'm walking along this beautiful lane in the countryside outside Vienna. So da da, and then here you have separate. Like, do you want separate bows and slurring against slurring in the bassoons? Try to have the same approach, I think. But this is good. Da ta, rather than slurring to the last note. So, and the same thing. Ta ta ta, ta ta ta. Now, and the same thing is true here. Like, do you want this all to be separate bows? This one of the things is like when I see inconsistent bowing, like sort of borrowed from the piano score and so on. I start to not trust whether or not the orchestrator intended, right? But I would say, like, if you want to kind of keep that feeling of smoothness going on, then maybe slur the upbeat and then slur the half bar, right? So up, down, up, right? And then here you could just go separate bows if you wanted to. Down, up, down, right? For a little bit more emphasis. See, because here you're slurring across repeated notes again, right? Maybe you could do this in first voice and then the separated notes in second voice if you have to slur, right? Okay, but, thinking about all that, I love the little touch of horn here. Harmonic density, setting up same texture. Yes, you do. You exactly do that. Do you maintain the strength? Yes, you do. You go crescendo. But I think that I would really like here you're setting a trap for your orchestra, right? You're saying, hey, violinists and violists, why don't you go crescendo up to here? So now when we get to here, the everybody in these two string groups is playing louder, but they don't know how loud to play because you've left it completely up to them. So they'll just do whatever the first chair is doing. And, hopefully the first chair The first chair violist is listening to the concertmaster, and they're all kind of connected together and make it the same loudness. And then you just have to hope that your second violinist and your lower string players, that you have to hope that these people are actually on their toes and noticing, oh, there was a crescendo in the other parts, and now everybody has to be the same amount of loudness. And why? And for that matter, why do the horns have to be soft, right? So if you really want a crescendo and then you want everybody to be soft, then you have to go piano subito. And I think you should mark how loud you want these parts to get, and you should have a crescendo in the lower strings. You don't really need one in the horns, but maybe like, and if you have the word crescendo, then you don't need the hairpins, and vice versa. If you have the hairpins, you don't need the word crescendo. I would say, why don't you go crescendo to here, to like the fourth beat or the third beat, go crescendo to mezzo forte, and then piano subito if that's what you want, right? Because it seems to me that like you sort of wanted this to be softer and smoother, and that's all fine. So I feel it's good. By the way, there are some wrong notes in this, and I'm not going to get into it. I'm seeing a lot of wrong notes, and I don't know why, because all that anybody had to do was copy and paste the data from the template, right? So, but I'm seeing like people in in the key of G minor putting in B naturals and things like that. So yeah. So anyways, this is very cool. Adding the bassoons to the horns with this, just it has a nice earthy color without being too bright. Yeah, and then same thing. Da, da, da. Bum bum bum. Right, and then once again, like here we have the B theme, and you're stating it in first violins again. Right, so just once again, like I said before, be careful about always having the first statement of the theme always in the same instrument, right? It does have a kind of it gives you a feeling of, oh, this is symphonic music and I'm being symphonic here. But I mean, how much can you keep that going, right? Da 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 da. And complementary color here. Double basses and bassoons, it's all good. These are, yeah, so it's, yeah, sort of strange, actually, a little, but it'll still work. And yeah, and then here you're going da ta 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 ta. You know what I would say here is to not slur the repeated note, and to just have it be a 16th, right? Because like the way that this is sounding, like you're having these notes sort of hang over. So you have an E, for instance, here, and the E is hanging over the D, right? So it just really makes everything a little sluggish in these patterns. So what if you went da 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 da, so like all under one slur, da ta, and then that could be the dovetailing note to the second flute, ta ta, and then ta. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and very cool. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know why this is E. Probably just a, Right, and then these triplets are great. They're fantastic. I'm not sure how well the timpani roll is working out right here, but pianissimo, just kind of keep it in the background. Maybe it'd be better to hold off until a little later. But I really do like the way that this follows my evaluation criteria. Thinking about the widening gap between the hands. So you're starting to fill in some of those pitches. You're getting deeper down in here. We have these violas, helping out the clarinets and so on. And you've got your G horns and so on. Right, and just really amping it up. Yeah, there were a couple of weird notes in here, so yeah, maybe proofread that. Right, and then yeah, I sort of miss the lack of horns. just feel like there could be more. And yeah, and of course, like these octave Cs would probably be, written in old notation an octave lower, right? But meaning to sound this way in the modern system. But like in the modern system, G horn would, even were something written modern for like a period orchestra, it would still be like, it would still be using I would hope that they would be using old notation. So, yeah. Yeah, and this is, just really very ferocious. Very nice. Against the triplets. And I feel like you're missing a trill here, right? Like there's a trill in the in the piano score, right? So I think that needs to be put back in. And I guess that would be on the E, right? So trill on E. Yeah. All right, now continuing on. Okay, that's ending everything. That's fine. Okay, so now it's kind of cool the way that you've got this all set up. The second or the first violins stating that da 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 da. Do you really want that? Yeah, that slur's too long. It'd be better to do the half bar. Ta 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 ta. Do you know what I mean? Or you could even do slur by the beam group. Ta 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 ta. Right. Yeah, and then using the clarinets as the lower accompaniment with horns and bassoon and so on. I think that the oboe is going to be bright, even though you've marked it at piano. I mean, it's just that low D. It just feels bright to me. And then here and then like you use the bassoon to sort of finish up the accompaniment pattern. And then oboe taking the lead with the cello below. Yeah. Then ba da, strings pushing da da. Then everybody bum. I really love that. And then soft winds and lower strings. Yada da 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 da. And why does this not have a slur and this does have a slur? The dovetailing should be on the 16th note, right? So maybe slurring here and slurring there. Right. Da 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 da. Yeah, so this all feels pretty good to me. Yeah, just like once again, I feel unsure about what is and isn't meant to have slurring in terms of like the bowing all staying together, right? Yeah, and we've talked about the dovetailing time values. Yeah, and this is very cool. Clarinets and bassoons, horns, and so on. Yeah, so I like the changes of color. That's really nice. And then this is going right back into what you did before. And I think that works pretty good. All right. So now let's compare what we saw on sections A, B, and C to what's coming up. So just as a reminder, right? So Johnny used strings to introduce, strings to state the main theme, along with a little bit of doubling by oboes and bassoons and so on, some horns on the octaves and so on, and then violins having a conversation with the cellos, which are supported by bassoons, and then just pretty much strings with a little bit of horn in here, and then kind of back and forth between mixed textures of strings and strings and bassoon, right? And then yada da da da, still in strings, but with bassoons, and then going into these patterns. So just remember these patterns: the triplets in the lower winds and the horns, the flutes trading off on the different patterns, and then the little dotted rhythms in the violins. I felt really effective. The triplet pattern in the violas as well. Yeah, and then building up like this, right? And then, as we saw, first violins stating the C theme with clarinets and bassoons under, and then the oboes over the top, and so on, right? So got all that. Now let's jump ahead to the E section. Hang on. There it is. Okay. All right, so here we've got oboe and clarinet, kind of more stating things as a chorale, right? Da 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 da. Yeah, and then once again, you have just single notes in the lower strings. Da 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 da. Yeah, you need better bowing down here. But this is okay. I'm not so sure, like, do you really need a duet on everything? A duet clarinets, that really exposed by themselves. I would want, if I had a duet clarinets, I would want them doubled by maybe the second violins or some notes in the violas or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I just would want, I'd want a bit of cushion to the tone, because the clarinets have a sort of a phased sound when you have them unison like this, and of course like the oboes have a very kind of a harder sound, and then putting the adue middle register oboes against middle register flutes, the oboes just totally win easily, right? This piccolo part on top of here is pretty interesting. What if this was just first flute? Just stick with first flute, and you had it up an octave, doubled by doubling the piccolo. That'd be interesting. All right, so you made some changes. You just basically thickened it up, right? Okay. And now instead of just first violin, you're adding flute on top. So I'm wondering, Johnny, if you've heard or read, I should say, my tip on the case of the disappearing flute, where I talk about how classical era composers used the flute, scored the flute an octave above the first violins in a way that made it sort of disappear into the resonance of the violins. So, but I mean, if you took the flute away, you would hear that the flutes were less resonant. But leaving it in just has a sort of a sweetening effect. So if that is what you intend, so why is the first flute leggermente but not the first violins or the bassoon and the cello? So yeah, just so long as you're aware that the flute will get sucked up by the first violins, like if you don't want them to, then you should mark them up dynamically, right? So if this is piano still, then maybe they could be mezzo piano or even mezzo forte, right? So they really stand out. Yeah, and then just a little bit of harmonic support, oboes going down to pizzicato. That's all good. Yeah, see, there's a lot of really good stuff about your score, Johnny. Just because I'm being picky on certain parts. It's mainly just because I want you, if you had fixed those parts, just imagine how much less I'd have to talk about. And then same thing here, up, down, up, right? And if you're gonna go da 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 here with your horns, I almost wonder whether or not it would be better to just not slur this and just go bum bum bum, just really nice and long bows fortissimo. But I mean, it still works slurred. It's fine. And I almost feel like this is so powerful that like you can even hear in the mock-up how the end of this note washes over the beginning of this note. So it is almost difficult to hear, and that might happen in a very live hall. So this might be a place where you might want to put like a little pausa at the end of the bar. So da bum bum. So the conductor would just like pull it back a little bit and place this downbeat right after the wash of color. It started to subside more. Right. Da da dum. Yeah, and then so on. Yeah, so this is all great, and I love the oboe and bassoon in contrary motion. Very, very cool. with followed by pizzicato. So great. All right, and now finally we have like a statement that's pure, that's just like absolutely fresh, right? Da, 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 dum. I don't even think you need this beginning note. Just let everything finish, and then have your oboe and first oboe, first bassoon start on beat 2, right? And it's very cool. This this kind of triple octave thing, which the triple octave of oboe and bassoon is something that I just talked about in that tip that I released about a month ago. Yeah, with the clarinet in the middle. It's so cool. And then, once again, just dovetail to like slur the beam group and then give us a teeny bit of a 16th here to dovetail to. Yeah, and then the triplets, it's just awesome. Yeah, just that feels very much part of Beethoven's language. Yeah, and then just this really fun cello stuff happening down here. Almost wish that you had like a contrabassoon to support your cellos, and also had your double basses unison at pitch, right, rather than down an octave. Okay. Yeah, and this is all pretty similar, except there's no support from your violas. Yeah, and very fun. Once again, if there's any way to keep it strong in the horns. Now you have a roll in the timpani, but we still don't have our trill, right? Right. Hang on, I'm going to jump ahead on this other screen that I've got going right here. Oops. Right. Okay. All right, and then flute over bassoons and horns. Yeah. So just be aware that this is going to be. You're saying I'm not sure where the dolce applies to, whether it's piano dolce for the for like say the first bassoon here, or whether it's intended for the G horn, right? But just be aware, even though you've got octaves here, or I guess a double octave in bassoon and flute, which I feel is just a very powerful kind of almost organ-like kind of a thing. With your G horn here, it's really going to be pretty powerful and sonorous. But having the clarinet coming here and answer it, if there's any way to just control this a little bit, that would be great. Okay. Da 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 da. Yeah, bum bum bum. It's so great. You can hear that stopped C sharp in there. Yeah, you're being very conscious of many stopped pitches. Although I think did I see a couple of A's in there? Da 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 da. Yeah, and just like doing all of these icy, distant octaves. Two octave unison duos. Yeah, very nice. Leaving the oboes and the bassoons out, making it kind of a little icier as well here. Right. So I'm unsure about this. Did this end up going the wrong direction? Forte, crescendo, then piano. So if this is piano subito, then I almost would want to ensure that you got it on exactly the right beat. But I think that this is just a goof, and this is meant to be a diminuendo, right, to piano. Yeah, and once again, I'm unsure about your intentions here when you have slurs on your bassoon part and your clarinet part, but none on your string parts, right? I just feel that it should match a little bit better. Yeah, and this is really weird. It's strange, okay, so this is second clarinet going to first, and then you're keeping the first clarinet part with the stems down. They should be stems up, right? It's just really weird the way this is scored. Yeah. And then, yeah, just no problems with any of this. I love the tremolo here, the unmeasured tremolo. Da 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 ba ba ba. Yeah, it's just really nice. Really nice scoring right in there. Bleep, bleep, bleep. Crunch, 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 crunch. Okay, now, all right, so this is an impossibility. You have G octaves, which are going to be played on the top two strings, and you have an open G below. Now, seeing as how this is a big old G major chord, why not just throw in the open D as well? Then it's possible, right? Then you have like a quadruple stop. A G fifth, open G fifth below, and the G octaves on top, right? So what happened to my D, right? This should have a D in it. All right. Okay, so now let's, speaking of D, let's jump back to section D, D as in development. So if you notice, we're kind of going through this fairly quick, Johnny. It's just really because there are, despite me scolding you about certain things like slurs and other things, just weird notation issues and so on, there really aren't a whole lot of problems with this. I mean, I wouldn't really call it exactly Beethoven period, but I think that it's an approach to it. It's like you're getting close to it, and I think that that's really good. All right. Da 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 da. Hey, so here you've got like oboe cushioning first violins again, and second violins unison and so on, and the same sort of approach as before. What if this was just an oboe solo here with like the strings supporting the way that they do here, but like not doubling, right? What if it was just a beautiful plaintive oboe solo? Right? But I mean, of course, the way that you've got this scored, you just like really add a huge amount of weight and color right in here. So, I mean, maybe it's better for you to stay with the strings the way that you've got it all planned. Da, da. F natural, right? It should, yeah. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Yeah, so yeah, this should be, yeah. Yeah, so that should be an F natural, right? Okay. Same thing there. Yeah, so every once in a while, like I hear clunkers like this, and I wonder, did my participants listen? Do they use their the mock-up or their playback to check the pitches, right? Like, would you not have recognized that was wrong, right? So yeah, so just you always try to audio proof it. Yeah, and then this is great the way that you're developing the triplets here. And here, I think if you are going to be loud here, then I think that the accompaniment has to get loud as well, and so do these the tremolo, and this has to push forwards into the forte, right? Da 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 ba da da bum 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 bum. So what if this was like a flash of temper with everybody getting loud and then back to piano, or even pianissimo? Da da dum, da da dum, ba bum, da da da. I really love the da 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 dum underneath. You have so many great ideas here, Johnny. Ba da da dum in thirds. Yeah, just so great. Yeah, really highly approve and of like what's going on in here. So great. I mean, this is the best part of the whole arrangement. Yeah, and then I like the way that like this also feels very authentic to me. The way that the voices work together. Pushing forwards here. I think that you could have had your second violin jump up and then supported this. The one thing that I'm not so happy about is the way that they're there just are big holes in your tutti here, right? So like there's no, there's no assistance that the violins could have given some of these parts here. No weight that they could have added, right? It just feels like the I mean, I really love everything right up to here, and then I like half of what's here because half of it is missing, right? And then da 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 ba dum bum bum bum. Yeah. Okay, so there was this one other thing that sort of kind of got stuck in my brain as I was thinking about just kind of overall general approach that would be helpful. Yeah, and that is just basically being more mindful about marking your entrances of who is playing what. Sometimes you're very conscious of it. A lot of the times, though, you just don't really let us know. Which bassoonist is this? Is it both? Is it one? Which one? Right? So it's just a general issue. It's something that you should learn to proofread when you finish up your scores, right? Now here, of course, it's obvious because you have a rest in the second voice and a notes in the first voice, and then it trades off, and it's very, very evident what is doing what. So that's not an issue. But then, and here you remembered to mark that this was the first player. Okay, so maybe just being occasionally careless, but I think you could have proofed it a little bit more. Where is it? There was this other part. Now, with me saying that, I also occasionally forget to mark, whether it's the first or second player. Yeah, it was here. And also, yeah, bassoons. Not sure if this is still a duet. All right. Okay. So anyway, Johnny, I really like this score a lot, and and if I have been a little tough on you about certain things, it's just because I know you are, you are deserving of having your scores really shine in terms of like working out what the strings do and being very clear and having the conductor be confident about what you mean and everything else, right? Yeah, one last little thing is like this is the right way to do it rather than this, unless there was some real important reason why the players should be sitting on this and really, really thinking about that half a bar or half a beat of rest, right? So it would be better just to mark this. And of course, as I mentioned before, this should just be a quarter note with a fermata, right? And you missed one here. So yeah, anyway. So yeah, once again, I just, I felt like you got very close in a lot of places, and you had some moments where I felt you really shined, and you were very creative and organized, and and said some new things that I hadn't seen yet in these challenges. So great work. And so like there's the only thing left to do is just to thank you for being patient with me while I tried to get my health back together. I didn't think it would take 2 years. Yeah. And so just I hope you're keeping at it. Like I've been mentioning in some of these other evaluations, I'm not sure when I'll be able to do another orchestration challenge, but I just really, whether I'm doing one or not, you should keep up with your orchestration and just keep working on things, do transcriptions, write, score your own music and everything else, and keep trying to work with orchestras and soloists and chamber music and so on. All right, because like you're showing some really great talent here, and some wonderful proportions and colors and everything else. And I think that like in this case, I felt like you were really aware of the sound of the mock-up in a lot of places, and you were using it to its best advantage, right? And if that is the truth, like if you really want that incredibly smooth sound, then you should be scoring slurs more and using the natural smoothness of the strings in that regard, and the winds too. All right. So great job. Now, Johnny, if you can maybe, there people in the comments are already, people below, viewers are already leaving comments for you and giving you their feedback and their plaudits and their suggestions and everything else. So if you could also maybe watch some of these, some of these other videos I've released, especially the ones in your category, the dotted brev category, which you'll recognize by, like if you just go to the link in the info to the playlist, then just whichever videos have the same thumbnail and the same opening page as yours, that's all Dotted Brev. The sort of much more serious but not really unhappy Beethoven. Kind of looking a little sullen, and that was a bit of a sullen period in his life when he was starting to get into a little bit of trouble with his emotions, more than usual, right? It was kind of way past the immortal beloved phase, and he's feeling a bit cheated and disappointed with things that he had hoped would happen. So anyway, check all that out. Thanks so much for sending me this score, and stay tuned, everybody, because I've got some really amazing stuff coming up over the next few videos. See you then.